Let me give you the stripped down, nude version first. It's this: that all systems lacking specific knowledge compensate by self-reference. Now, by systems, of course, I'm referring, and including man. I'll give you a longer version, sort of dressed up, is all institutions, systems, and individuals lacking certain specific knowledge of all sorts, but certain specific knowledge make up for it by self-reference, which is a fancy way of saying talking about themselves. This is right at the heart of how energy moves about and keeps, among other things, I guess, us meeting and me talking, but on a greater level, keeps life apparently expanding in the secondary sense, in the singular sense of man's intellectual and man's singular world, by every definition. Everything that is unique, everything that is absolutely dependent upon man's existence on this planet. There is a way in which that we were earlier hinting and talking about, if some of you recall, about the possibility of words, emotions, ideas. But let's try words for a second. The possibility of words actually being alive themselves, not just metaphorically, but of words actually being alive, and how, as many of you took pains to point out to me, certainly to my advantage, that sure would explain a lot. If words were actually alive, that would just explain so much that it cannot be true. Or if it's true, it cannot be widespread. And if it is widespread, it cannot be commonly known, because it would blow many, many people's phony baloney jobs right out of the water. There would be no wonderful things like psychology or religion or probably romance. Certainly it'd be hard to get a second mortgage. If you consider, at the widest sense that I gave you, the widest definition of institutions of all sorts, no need to single out anyone, although we may do it before we're over just to extract an example, but every institution, from the military, the governmental, the bureaucracies, the religions, social clubs, singles bars, every institution, every organization, no matter how ad hoc, no matter how permanent the organization may be, and all individuals. By anyone, even ordinary people, by anyone's observation, there comes a time, many times probably, that those institutions, organizations, or individuals seem to lack some specific knowledge, even by their own admission, even by presented by some problem that the institution supposedly is structured to confront, to deal with. It's constant. That's nothing. It's no attack on any institution, from religion on to science. They're continually confronted with questions that they will admit, well, we do not have the exact answers. There is certain knowledge, now that you bring this up, or maybe we brought it on ourselves through our own investigation, through our own march forward. There is information we do not have. But that's not the end of it. Well, if that's the end of it, then in some way that institution, the organization, whoever's speaking, that in some way is signaling, if not an end, some sort of slowdown. It is a portent regarding that institution, individual, organization's growth. It could be temporary, but at least in that area, if they say, well, we got no specific knowledge regarding this problem, if that's the end of it, it's somewhat of an anomaly. Because what normally happens is, that is not the end of the sentence. That is not the end of their statement. That is not the end of the energy transfer that is going on. To make up for it, or first, you notice I said compensate, any of you who really notice specific things, because I thought it had a certain, if not classier, more technical or specific or scientific sound than make up. Now, that sounds like something your mom would say. It compensates for this lack of certain knowledge in a very specific way that's not noticed, and that is by self-reference. Before I get into real specifics, you might care to consider on a much wider vista what I'm trying to bring up It could be said, to even give you a third and maybe a fourth version of the original stripped down hot rod version, it could be said that all systems, in part, always refer to themselves. Now, that's taking out that at specific times they are confronted with an area, a question, a problem that perhaps is unquestionably in their purview, in their charter, in their bylaws, that they cannot deal with. But beyond that, on a wider view, even when they're apparently dealing with it, you could say, for the third version, that all systems always, in part, are referring to themselves. And if you want either 3.5 or the fourth version, it's up to you. It's the same thing, it's up to you to number it. The other version would be even more specifically, and that is that all systems only refer to themselves. Better make that maybe 3.2 so it doesn't seem like it's such a big deal. Maybe 3.2, like a footnote. A misunderstood sick. So you do have it now. The stripped down version is simply that all systems, or what systems lack in any specific knowledge, they compensate for by self-referral. And the longer version was, the second one, was all institutions, organizations, and individuals lacking certain and specific knowledge will make up for it by self-reference, talking about themselves, and version 3, that all systems always, in part, refer to themselves, and then 3.2. Since I brought it up, I shouldn't have brought it up, but since I did it, that all systems only refer to themselves. Even when, let's skip the numbers, and let's go ahead. Even when a system, to give you a good example, any of you have any doubt, even when the system is apparently, without any doubt, at the ordinary level, pointing to, referring to something outside of itself. Now let's see, what would be a good example? Oh, all right. One comes to mind. It's good to have one's mind and not be under the absolute sway of the vice president. One comes to mind, historically, may be of no particular operational interest to anyone, but historically, you're all old enough to remember this. Religions, that kind of metaphysical search that people used to talk about, the gods. What could be further outside of oneself, outside of any system? You can look at it as an individual, or you can look at it as a systematic institution of religion, of worship, of spiritualism of all sorts, but normally referred to as the big R, or the little r, of religion. So, the investigation, the inquiry, a systematic search for, philosophy of, investigation of what could be further outside the system itself, that is the religion, than the gods. So evidently we again have slipped up and just picked out the most extreme example. That is, if there's any possibility of this not being capable of flying, we've already put our foot in it. To pick out the example, the one example that will bring this mother to earth, that will kill the Wright brothers and anybody else on board, right? Don't be too hasty. Not until you've tasted the food. It would seem that outside the system, still remember we're referring in this case the system itself, let's say religion, and all the individuals that could be involved and apparently so interested in what religion ostensibly is about. The system itself is pointing outside. If you say, what's the point, at least intellectually, which would be your only interest anyway, what is the actual intellectual thrust, the intellectual purpose of this system of religion? It is to point to investigate, to try and produce or be a storehouse of knowledge regarding the gods, the forces outside man, the forces actually created man. So we're talking about serious outside of itself vis-a-vis the system. What could be a more astute example of there being a system and what it is involved with, what seems to be its purported bailiwick, is completely outside the system. Well, now that I've established that, I think we'll all take a nap. Might I suggest to you, nay, nay, contraire, and tut, tut. Using that example and any one that you might find on your own that you could consider greater, lesser, the system in this case cannot refer absolutely in any way to information outside of itself. For one thing, get ready. Send all the children and the priest and rabbis out of the room lest they hear this and become discouraged and want to become roofers or attorneys or some other some other honorable profession, but men and women of the cloth are sorely needed, especially what's happened to the unionization of some of the mills in North Carolina. For any investigation, a system, to make an inquiry, it has to be able to do what? It has to define what it's inquiring about. It has to define the area that it is attempting to describe. It has to define the information it's after. And it has to be able to establish the standards of coming to a conclusion. That is, if the religion is going to say, yes, what is it you want? And you say, well, I'm here to get information about the forces outside man. I want to know what the forces are behind all this. You came to the right place, kid. Well, tell me about it. All right? We have this holy book here. We have these kind of rituals. We have this kind of information that's been passed along through this great lineage. We have a history. You understand? They're already defining whatever conclusion, assuming they're going to come up with one. Even if the conclusion is we're not sure, because that's their conclusion. You still must define how you're trying to arrive at the conclusion, or what you consider to be your field of expertise or your field of inquiry. If you went up to a church and say, I'm not religious, I've read about it, and you are a church, and they say yes, well, tell me what you do. And why should I be interested in the church? What are they going to say? Anybody, not just the church now. Take it down to the Moose Club, the American Legion. What are they going to do? They have got to define in some way. They got to mark off some territory in your neural system to say, well, here's what we do. But to say what they do, let's go back to religion. Again, I'm assuming you can follow my intent that the example would seem far removed from the system itself. They cannot define what they're attempting to do by the gods, whatever that might be, the forces outside. It's impossible. You've got to define what you're going to do by the system. That is, the system has got to refer to itself. Yeah. Maybe said a priest. But wait a minute, that's not all there is to it. There's more to that. I hear what you're doing. Don't try to pull some kind of philosophical verbal flim-flam on me. Not after I went to school 10 years. It takes 10 years to be a never mind. They could say, well, you're simply fooling around with semantics in some way, because what we're actually after is going to transcend mere verbalization. Now, wait a minute. For instance, once you squirt a little, metaphors flying. Once you squirt a little garlic into the pound cake, no matter what you do to it, you understand? Later on, after it comes out, I'm not a cook, but later on, I'm suspecting that you can just load it down with icing, put whipped cream on it, but some way there's garlic in that bread, that cake, that even if you couldn't taste it, surely science is to the point that they could discern that one drop of garlic. In other ways, I assume life says things like, oh, there's one, they say you can't be a little pregnant. Do you follow? If the system has got to refer to itself to define what it's going to do, of course, there's no mistake, nothing is wrong in life, but it's not seen this way. What is going on is not observed by the ordinary intellect. Once this is done, the continuing claims that, well, we've got to talk about it, so in some way we've got to define what we're after, but that does not discolor, that does not spoil our ultimate aim, which is to get in contact with the gods, Tut tut. You can't be a little pregnant. You can't put a little garlic in the cake and then later say, "No, it never was there. I just had to put a little garlic to get your attention. But now let's forget about the garlic." And then you eat the cake and you say, "Well, I can't forget about the garlic." Because you're ordinary, you do forget about the garlic. You just take it. But you see what I'm getting at. The system, all systems in the secondary world have got to refer to themselves or they can't operate. They have got to, and I'm just using terms, I can expand this, I can twist it. They've got to define, they've got to describe, they have got to establish what they're doing. I don't mean just to sell themselves, but to themselves. It's not just a matter of advertising on their part to induce people, but if you go and talk to them and they try to describe what they're doing, the bare minimum, if they said, "I am not trying," if a priest or whoever in a religion said, "I am not trying to convert you, but you asked me what we're doing and here's what we're doing." Even, if you can follow this, even what would appear to be even less threatening than that, the people inside the system itself having to describe themselves. Why in the hell do I get up at 5 in the morning and pray? Why do I do all that sex? Why am I here? That individual system, that one man's nervous system, has got to define to itself, why am I still following a religious life? Whatever it describes to itself has got to be self-referring. The man has got to talk about himself. Even if apparently he is involved with a search for completely, totally otherworldly rewards. Information matters. It doesn't matter because you have got to start out with the system, including the nervous system of man, referring to itself. Without that, nothing in the secondary world, nothing in the intellectual world makes any sense. Absolutely. All intellectual references, all inquiries must always, in part, to give you the third possibility, they have always, in part, got to point back to themselves, even if they start out spatially, three-dimensionally, not just metaphorically, but go back to religion. And if you said, all right, the systems of religion, what are they involved with? They would point as far away from themselves as would be three-dimensionally possible. Am I correct? Your forefathers used to believe, I guess, that God lived up in a Tijuana paint shop on black velvet. I mean, up in the heavens or somewhere. And of course, NASA kind of messed that up, except for those that understand that NASA is just a sound stage out in Hollywood. But anyway. So now it's not necessarily up in the heavens, but it's somewhere. It's sure as hell not here. And so all the religions, spatial as much as possible and intellectual, have got to point as far away as possible. Even if they say, well, you know, it's more a state. It's more, I can't tell you exactly where the great gods live and the forces. And you say, well, is it here? Oh, no, it's not here. I don't mean just in this church or in this temple. I mean, is it, like here? You mean this city? Nah. Well, is it here in our reality? Oh, no. It's not even any part of our reality. It is somewhere else. Do you understand the system is already referred to itself? When you say it is somewhere else, it's not here. Then the rest of it, this is the way the intellect works, the way the systems work, the way the systems at the individual level and a human work. But as soon as it says, no, it's not here, it's somewhere else, it's already referred to itself because it had to start off, at least tacitly, you missed it. It's referred to itself and say, all right, we're here, it's somewhere else. And you can say, wait a minute, all you're doing is talking about yourself. No, kid, you're dumb. I just told you it's not here. The information you seek, what we're after, the systematic thrust of religion, this whole raison d'etre, if they're priests, they can speak better French than we can. It says it's somewhere else. It's nothing to do with me. Don't keep saying it's self-referral. You can't point somewhere else without self-referral. You've already talked about yourself. Not any of I suspect that this, I just keep using religion because it has been where most of this resided, systematically, institutionally speaking. But now consider all forms of inquiry, all forms of people believing that they are investigating the nature of life, the nature of human behavior. And they keep trying, stressing, the more they get toward away from the religious end and toward what they call the scientific, the more they insist that systems cannot be so tainted, being self-referring, that is not the scientific way. Real scientific investigation is when it does not refer. I mean, insofar as possible, taking into account, the limits of quantum mechanics and all that, and the investigation itself affecting observed. Forget all, bypass all that. It is still the point that they're saying theoretically. And once it reaches any form of practice that can be measured and repeated, we have got to get away from self-referral, because it doesn't matter in the scientific matters whether a guy over here at Berkeley discovers something, says he does, writes it up, and then somebody in Bonn investigates it, and then somebody at some Italian university. If it is scientific reality, if it is objective reality, then it is not tied to self-reference. It doesn't matter who, what school, what college, what scientist tried to see it. So there is no self-reference, or it's not science. Back to me telling you, take your choice. I gave you 4 versions of it. Everything in part is always self-referral. Of course, if it gets much further, I just go ahead and blow the beans and just tell you that everything is self-referral, or it won't work. But yet notice that they will say, they insist, that's the way the nervous system is now wired and primed up, that to be as close as you can to objective reality, things, although I made up the term in this sense, they would have to say, listening to what I said, they'd say, nah, the whole object of science is not to be self-referring. And they might even say, and applaud me in passing, that, well, you start off with a good example about religion. That's why we're so far removed from religion, even though we may not be anti-clerical. But religion is always self-referral. It's always emotional. It's always subjective. It always has to do with somebody saying, hey, I talked to God. Like I talked to the unifying force of the universe. All you scientists forget all that, trying to stick all this together and come up with string theories and all that. I talked to him. Well, how do we know that? Well, because I told you. Well, why did he pick you? You don't have any credentials. I don't know. It's just, he said sometimes that he likes to talk to people. And he picked me out. Then the scientists would say, that is, people operating closer at this city high end of the nervous system, would say, that is the problem with religion. It's always a personal, it's a subjective, and people saying it's a matter of revelation, and I got this secret information, and they just told it to me. Or he just told it to me, so we can't go with that. It is self-referral, and so they might say, you picked a good example to start with, but don't put it on us. We are not so tainted, not real scientists, because we are not involved with self-reference. That is very impressive. Other than the fact that you can't talk, other than the fact that you cannot deny in the most intelligent, scientific, sang-franc of terms that you are not self-referring without being self-referring. You cannot refuse to talk about yourself without talking about yourself. How about that? You cannot say, all right, I've had it. I'm sick of hearing you talking about myself. I don't ever talk about myself. Would you repeat? I never talk about myself. So that's the kind of guy you are. Yeah. They're sitting ducks. We're all sitting ducks, if you live in the city. Of course, besides what I just said, there's also the ever popular, never forgettable dynamics. In other words, I'm going to put a little spin on this for you about self-referral, is for humans to be wired in such a way, no matter what they're talking about, to varying degrees, whether it be talking about apparently subjective religious ideas or supposedly more cold-blooded objective scientific Paul DeRoy, is there is always this inescapable, forever popular, take me to the prom tonight dynamic of men, the system of an individual man, telling what he thinks about the information. Or for those of more tender sensibilities, what he feels about it. He can say, well, I'm not engaged in self-reference. I am, in fact, a cold-blooded scientist. Are you listening? Well, I'm playing both parts now. I didn't say anything. I'm telling you, I don't engage in that kind of self-referral that you're talking about. I'm not vain. I've never sought a prize. If they decide to award me the Nobel I'd probably turn it down. I don't try to dress up. I don't have leather patches on my sleeves, and I don't smoke a pipe, and I don't try to get my hair teased to look like Albert. I'm just a humble man seeking wisdom and truth. In other words, I'm not any kind of guy. I do not engage in self-reference. Do I have to take another shot at those kind of... I'd say, in other words, you're not the kind of guy I've been talking about that wants to tell you what kind of guy he is. Nope, I'm not. So that's the kind of guy... I've never met a guy like you, but that is the kind of guy you are. So no matter what it is, if I was going to leave you, at least in this paragraph, with the most common and probably the most entertaining denominator, is that no matter how you look at it, no matter what the subject is, there is always that ever popular, whatever's coming up, of you being a system and having to refer to yourself is just always hear what it is. Maybe it's something you've never even heard before, a brand new theory of some kind of, in the laws of subatomic physics. And you can hear it for the first time. Or some brand new idea about the nature of religious reality or whatever. And you can hear it. In other words, not know nothing, as they say in southern universities. And not know nothing about the subject. But are you left flat-footed? Are you left without any energy? Are you suddenly out of gas and nothing but a glass container? Are you just stuck down the side of the road? No. Because you can always do this. You can hear it and go, huh. Well, I'll be darned. In other words, you're going to say, you already did if you can follow it subtly, what you think about it. Of course, you could curve yourself and actually, instead of actually saying what you think, you can go, would you repeat that? And they repeat it, and you can raise an eyebrow and look and try to watch the rest of the crowd, those that may know something about it, and see how they're reacting. Are they going to... Some of them, is your impression, that they are hearing this for the first time, and you watch them, and are most of them looking very skeptical, or some of them begin to go, like, wait, that man's right. In other words, it's called stalling for energy. I think you people call it stalling for time. You go, So you don't have to know anything about it. You just simply go into saying, well, that is an interesting theory. And I, for one, am always, now I'm not an expert in this field, but I, for one, truly support science. I do. And I support, even in areas I don't understand, sometimes I know that some of these parochial minds in our society will say, we should not be spending tax dollars on this kind of theoretical science, but I, for one, am all in favor. And, of course, now we're not talking about anything about what was going on about that, except it's still moving of energy, and it's still a system doing what I started out telling you it will do. It will refer to itself. It's just not doing it so many words, but it's saying, hey, I don't know what's going on here, but let me tell you how I feel about it. And let me tell you how I feel about things brought up in my presence that I can't respond to and that has the propensity to make me look like a dickhead. Let me tell you how I feel about that. Let me tell you how I feel about science anyway. Let me tell you how I feel about smart aleck scientists. I've never trusted most of you, or any version in there. Anything a human can say, you can say it, and it's self-referral. And it fuels itself. It's nothing dumb. It's nothing untoward. Of course, somebody else there in the same situation can listen to you. And when you get through making whatever statement you make, they can go, that's the biggest bunch of BS I ever heard in my life. Who the hell you think you're fooling? You don't know anything about this. They can either say it loudly to the whole group or just to you privately. It doesn't matter. But you understand? They're doing the same thing. Well, let's say this, as far as you're concerned, if I got to really play ordinary intelligence, that, I've been caught. Caught of what? You can say, well, this person is more intelligent than me because not only do they apparently know something about the subject that was raised, they were smart enough to know that I don't. No, they're not. I mean, they may, but so what? But you can say, well, yeah, but they caught me. He took me right aside and he says, I don't want to embarrass you publicly. I don't know how many other people here realize it. But what you tried to say, in regards to that theory that the man was talking about, you're so far off base that it almost take a child to overlook it. And I just wanted to tell you, just trying to be friendly, helpful. Maybe you'd like to cool it. All he's doing is self-referral, regardless of the fact that his view three-dimensionally, if we find out what this guy's view that's taking you aside, we might say, well, it matches completely. Or he might have been in on the original inquiries and experiments that led to this guy over here making this pronouncement of this new theory. He might be in partnership with him. So you could say, well, he understands what's going on. But that's still not what's going on. It's self-referral because he's saying, you're a dickhead. I feel like you made an ass of yourself. There is no way out, all the way from what would appear to be the crudest, most subjective, emotional areas, systems and individuals in life, all the way to that which might appear to be the most objective, cold-blooded, scientific. They all right, I'll give you number 3, in part. But notice, even that third version was, they always, even in part. So at least you got that much. Always, even in part, are engaged in self-reference. Consider we change the paragraph a little bit. There is a sure sign that any city, a sure sign that a city has reached a laudable level of secondariness. There are many, but there's one I feel inclined to bring out. The spirits of the gods have it's malaria. Yeah. There is a prime example of the secondariness reaching just exhilarating levels in cities, and in our city, our planet, but our city of ordinary intelligence. And it's when the city reaches the level that it suddenly understands the uses, the efficiency, and the method, which is not hard once you got the first two, of goods and services, even once sold, advertising themselves. The example that most readily comes to my poor little mind is that great organization of the U-Haul trucks. At least that particular corporation, the U-Haul itself, whoever actually owns it now. But the trucks, it's goods and services in a sense. But at any rate, you're going to go rent a truck, and so to go rent a truck, we'll assume that everybody on this planet, if you rent a truck, you're going to move it. In other words, it's going to move about in the city somewhere. Short distance, great distance. The truck itself, you go in and you give them your credit card. It's paid for. You got it. But now in the last few years, somebody, nothing brand new, but theirs is so great, they've got pictures, they got paintings on the sides of trucks. They got them now, each one mentions a state. And they'll show the state flower or the state tap dance or the state joke or some hero. God knows who's the hero from South Dakota. The first man who left. No, don't write me. But anyway, on the truck is advertising, and there's all kinds of signs. If you haven't noticed, and they go by you when you're out jogging, besides the nice graphics and a little flower and stuff about the state of adventure, and it says, of course, parenthetically, ha ha ha, South Dakota has a picture of a prairie dog looking bored or something. But then all around the truck they have advertising. Not only have signs about adventures in moving, call your local, and they got 800 numbers and 900 numbers. But then all over the truck they got arrows pointing to stuff like only truck with automatic door openers, only truck with two spare tires, all over the truck. It is a rolling advertisement. All right, now of course we'll assume all of you know this got nothing to do with advertising, certainly not an attack on advertising or the great capitalistic consumer-run way of life. But consider what life is up to if you can get a little past trucks. If not, stay with trucks for a minute. That you go and you pay for the service, for the use of this truck. They tell you the price, you agree, you strike a bargain, you pay them, and then the thing advertises itself. In the truck, I just use a good example. People do it all the time. They give you matches and bars that has the name of the bar on it. I know it's nothing new, but just think, the truck moves. I mean, you buy it, the service. You purchase the use of the service with a full, unconditional intent, if you got any sanity, unless you're going to live in it, to move it. So it's going to carry advertising for the service. But notice the service has already been paid for. It's already in use. It's already in commercial use. It is already being profitably moved about. When you see somebody, assuming they didn't steal it, and a U-Haul going down the street, the U-Haul company has already made money. Because this person has already paid for it. They got his credit card number. So he's already paid for it. They've already made their profit. And yet they have made the thing continue to advertise itself. This does not in any way strike any of you as being compatible to the apparent self-fueling mechanism of secondary life. It is not. I don't think I'll leave it to say it's just not a beautiful self-fueling mechanism. It's even beyond that. It's, if we may put a spin on a cliche, it's not only carrying its own weight, it's carrying its own weight, and then, by God, some unbelievable sum. In other words, the truck's not only paying for itself. The U-Haul company went out and bought a Ford truck from some, paid their money. The truck is not only paying its way. If you want to look at the truck as being some sort of living system itself, the truck is not only paying its way, it's carrying its own weight, literally and figuratively, but then some. But then, underline, some. Because it's not just paying its way. It is not something in the systematic life of life itself only paying its own way. When things are reaching that proper secondary level, they not only pay their own way, but then some. The U-Haul truck with advertising on it. It is, may I suggest to you, at one level, the ultimate self-reference. What else does the truck have to do? If you're going to try and engage in some sort of secondary, which would be verbal communication with the truck, and there it runs along, you can say, are you still in the employ of the U-Haul? And they say, you know, I'm still wearing their uniform. You say, yeah, you're right. How long have you been with them? About 6 months. Holding up good, yeah. Treat you all right. They service me quite well. You know, every time I run out of gas, they give me gas. When the oil gets a little dirty and I begin to feel, you know, kind of itchy, they'll change the oil for me. But the thing is now engaged in a kind of ultimate self-reference, because it's not only paying its way and then being treated in a manner that will keep it alive. That is, it's being fueled apparently even inside the three-dimensional world, but from sources outside of itself, because a truck cannot go up to a gas pump and reach out and fill itself. It cannot change its oil. So apparently, out there, somebody does it. So there seems to be a mutual benefit that each person, each side of the system is carrying its weight. But then it's more than that. Because when you're engaged in self-reference, it is a kind of ultimate carrying of your weight, and then some. It is a living advertisement for yourself. It is a living advertisement, should we go this far, of life itself, advertising itself, advertising what it is doing, the goods and services in which it is proficient, the goods and services within its own body which are still alive and are either parts of growth itself or, looked at a temporary way, a kind of catalyst in some isolated situation, but at least a catalyst for growth. If you refer back yourself to some of the descriptions we have used of late, you could see that all individual, all institutional markings off the great dogs individually and the great dogs collectively, marking off new territory, all other forms, any possible form of proselytization of religion, science, humanistic philosophy, the great AMVET philosophy, whatever that is. Be a veteran and get drunk. But all proselytization of any kind, all institutions, all systems, even of an individual attempting, if not you out there on the street corner trying to push some religion, if you're just talking to somebody, a relative, a son, a daughter, a mother, if you're trying to convey some information, you're attempting to mark off on somebody's neural system. You're attempting to proselytize in some way. If you're just saying, hey, look, you're my brother, you're my older brother, and it's probably none of my business. You didn't ask, but I'm going to tell you what. I just got to because I love you. You're drinking too much. I'm telling you, you should cut down on drinking. That is a form of proselytization. But all of that are forms of what? Self-reference. It is a fueling of a system. No matter what apparently is the outcome, whether in this case your brother quits drinking, whether he gets mad and punches you in the nose, whether he says get lost and then you get mad and punch him in the nose. It doesn't matter. The truck's rolling on. You haul it is making money. As long as self-reference is going on, energy is being passed about. Words are still alive. If I could point you back to the possibility of words themselves actually being alive, if you take it in a context that we have been sketching and mapping out tonight, you might be able to consider this possibility that in a secondary world, that all words, all info is in a continual state of attempting to reproduce itself, to spread, to pollinate. And thus, even if it was possible, which is not, but if it was possible in some way in man's world that there could be such thing as an absolute objective conveyance of information. That's assuming, of course, it was objective information. But then there could be some objective conveyance of information. I'm suggesting to you, if that was possible, life would realize it and realize that is sterile. That would be an impotent sex act. Because words are attempting to impregnate other people. Energy is attempting to fly from one person to another and take hold. Who wants to go rent a truck and drive somewhere and get there and it's not where you wanted to go? Or you got the truck and you thought you were driving over to your apartment to move all your furniture, and no matter where you drove, it was never your apartment. Or something such as that. Do you not see trying to go from here to there in a truck, in your thought, in trying to convey information and attempting to accept information? The words themselves are attempting to reproduce themselves. Not exactly, of course, because you can't do that. You know, even if you had a child with your twin sister, no, it's not going to be exactly you. The words cannot exactly reproduce themselves. They're not supposed to. But they are attempting to spread their own pollination. That is so that even if it was possible, in case you lost your place, that even if it was possible that there could be objective conveyance of information, that is not what life needs. What it needs is some form of self-referral, that even if it could do it, it wouldn't. Even if a person could do it and they understood it, they wouldn't do it. Pretty confusing, huh? Not to me. Oh. What do you mean, not to you? Well, I'm just speaking for myself. That's known as a humorous interlude to, what is it? Take the dandruff off? Now take the top off. Take the edge off. Was that it? I am suddenly brought to mind of a new story. Not that I made it up or anything. It's I don't know, I just can't resist. I know it has no relationship, but it's in, I believe, the northeastern part of the Carpathian Mountains. That the man was either British or American, it doesn't matter. But there have been tales of yet another Bigfoot type, a prehistoric, leftover, humanoid type creature that, the way I fairly recent report, but the people in that area call the creature Watuga. And the guy said, anyway, it was a long story and we ran out of time, but he went through a whole process of trying to narrow it down. There's been reports coming out, and it seems to be better reports, he claimed, than the stuff about the one up in Tibet, and the ones in China, and the ones everywhere else, and the ones in Yosemite Park, and the ones in South Dakota. But this one seemed to be more up to date, and there have been more recent sightings, and it seems to be more reliable. Anyway, he went to all the trouble. He climbed up there. It took him days, and the first time he got into the general area where he heard that they had been seeing the Watuga, I'm just trying to relay it more or less, that he'd been climbing like for 20 hours, so he fell down, made himself a little camp, went to sleep, and God knows how long he slept, but he says he woke, and some of the natives there had come out of the mountains, and anyway, before he saw him, he said he was awakened by the sound of them hollering, Watuga, the Watuga. And he said he jumped up and he hollered, where? And they went, there, pointing at him. I don't suspect anybody sees any possible correlation between me saying that I just thought of that and it had no relationship between that and the you haul it with its own advertising on itself. Or that no information can be conveyed in the secondary world without it being in part always self-referring. I guess if you were real crude and you followed that story at all, you could say, wait a minute, that's some kind of metaphysical metaphor that men searching for some great something end up only discovering themselves. Jesus. God. That's older than your maiden aunt's underwear. Get past that. Not that doesn't have any validity, not that you couldn't base some sort of sermon or Sunday school lesson on that. But consider past that. Consider it, the guy's awakened by cries of what he was looking for. Consider a truck awakened by the sound of engines running. And the very thing that he thought he was looking for. They're hollering, there it is. And he jumps up, where? And they go, there. Now, not just metaphorical, not just that, well, each man, the thing he's searching for is actually himself. Consider it further. Consider what we were talking about self-referral. Consider about a kind of advertising of oneself as being the ultimate in self-referral. How it is not possible not only to talk, but of course not possible to do that which is a progenitor of talk. It is not possible to think without it being a form of self-advertising, without it being a form of self-reference. That is, internally, without you suddenly awakening, metaphorically speaking, by the sound of, here, where, there. Oh. All right. You're going to play hard to get. Where is a U-Haul-It really at home? Regardless of what it says on the truck may says, I love to travel. Rent me, call 800 so-and-so. Where is the truck really at home? Where does all trucks want to be? Or where do all trucks want to be? Where do all Watugas want to be? They want to be in the Watuga yard. The trucks want to be back in the lot. Where does everyone want to be? Oh, life makes them say, I'd like to go to the, where was it? The northeastern Carpathian Mountains? Sure you would. Well, yeah, I really would. All right. But where would you like to be? Forget actual external travel. Where would you like to be? Oh, you mean that kind of stuff. Oh, I'd like to understand what's going on in life. I'd like to have, some better attitude toward people, not just cheap rationalization. Really? Oh, yes. There is a kind of, in the few minutes we got, I don't see that I have to actually or shouldn't have to beat it in the ground. There is a kind of self-fueling that actually gets down to the unseen force that we've never mentioned of silence. Wherein it's not an ordinary attack, as you know, on people talking about themselves, people talking about religion, science, sports, no matter what. But the kind of energy that runs through many people's nervous system, or everybody at one time or another, that is critical, all the way from being critical, all the way from being assumed to be intellectually critical, as a matter of fact, down to just being dumbass, sarcastic. All of it is based upon not primary activities of people. It's based upon the secondary activities of people, which of course are based on the primary, but it's always on the secondary, because there is no way to criticize a human nervous system, put it crudely, would never think, no one's would ever think, which is not the proper description, but there is none, would never think to criticize primary activities of somebody else. It's not possible. The transfer of energy on the basis of criticism, on the basis that, without any doubt, things are not exactly right, it's always on the basis of the secondary activities. But remember, criticism is a part of every production. The footnotes are a part of the main body. There is no way to be in the secondary world objective. There is no way not to refer to oneself, no matter what you say, no matter what seemed to be the basis verbally, no matter rhetorically how one might attempt to defend oneself and say, well, what I'm about to say about that has nothing to do with me. I have no personal interest. My family has no interest. I've got no intellectual axe to grind. My reputation doesn't depend on it. But I have got to say something just on the basis of being one of the seekers of truth. I've got to... Why drag Irving Berlin into this? But just to say a word about the truth, I have got to point out the shortcomings in what has been said about this. And it's got nothing to do with me. You can say that. They could beat themselves with a cerebral cat of 10 tails. They could let blood out of their temples and swear, I have nothing to gain by this. I have simply got to point out that this is wrong. And it's got nothing to do with me. It's not possible. But then all ideas that strike people, that I am in some way justified, even if I don't say anything, I am justified in having an adverse reaction to what I've just heard that those people have done, what this guy just said, what somebody's theory is, this book. Why did they lead off the news tonight with sports? What in the hell is happening to life that the lead story is Montreal traded so-and-so? Give me a... God, when can I find a planet that has some intelligence so I can move there? See? You don't understand. There is absolutely no basis. I guess I really got to be fast and just get to the point. No, I don't. There's just absolutely no basis whatsoever for anyone feeling upset, except at the local level, which is always self-referring. You cannot get away from it. You cannot have it both ways. Of course, you're ordinary, you can. But an intellectual, a revolutionist can not only not have it both ways, you can't even have it three ways, because that still won't work. You've got to have at least 3.2, I told you. It's really 4, and then it's 5 once you get to 4. But you can't have it both ways. Even if it's possible to have it both ways, to be a revolutionist, you can't have it both ways. That is, you've got to see that locally, at the level of self-reference, things are amiss. You get mugged, at the local level, there's no doubt somebody breaks into your car and steals your something important, your bowling ball, and you're upset. Locally, that's a problem. Everybody that gets robbed and mugged locally are having a problem. Any country, if you want to get to a greater level of an institution, every city that's being mugged, that's a local problem. But to say that that is a problem, that's the end of it, you're engaged in the total self-fueling, inescapable dynamic of self-reference. And remember where we started tonight. Self-reference makes up for a lack of specific information. That's exactly what it does. It's supposed to. It's not some kind of jerry-rigged error that life is made. It's on the basis that the very thing that institutions and all systems and individuals believe that they're after, like, well, what I want's the answer to this question. And of course, the secondary world, there is no answer to that question. Whatever the hell it is, there is no answer to that question. If it is, the question's dead. The question, nobody's even going to remember it. That is, you want a prize, and the prize is something that nobody wants anymore, including you. I mean, it's so useless that 2 seconds later you say, what'd you win? You don't even know. That's what. So no question can be answered. And so the thing is, ordinary people have then some kind of critique. You're wired up to find it wrong that there is no answer. But there's not supposed to be an answer. That's what self-reference is for. It's to say, well, wait a minute. I've heard several theories along these lines. The answer still lives. Life still lives. Or to say, wait a minute. I know what you're inferring, but you're wrong. Or anything you say, as long as it's self-referring, it is a make-up. It is a compensation for what you normally think of as being a lack of knowledge. But it's not. It is a continuation of the circulatory system. It is life still breathing. It is life still having energy circulated. It is like arteries continuing to extend, carrying nourishment. Yeah, but it seems like ignorance. You said it. A microscope with a jaundice sees everything as having a yellow hue. So, if you see it as being ignorance, hey, you said it. Are you sure you understood that? Tell me again, what happens when we ride safe? We ride safe, right? We ride safe.